Jason Carter, a successful architect, discovers that his wife, Rebecca, has been hiding a devastating secret, an affair with a colleague. As their once perfect marriage unravels, Jason faces a heartbreaking decision. Can he forgive her and rebuild their life? Or is the betrayal too much to overcome? In a whirlwind of tension, lies, and emotional turmoil, both Jason and Rebecca must confront their darkest fears. Will they find a way back to each other, or is their love truly beyond repair? Watch until the end to discover the shocking truth that could change everything. It's a brisk evening in the fall of 2024. The sun has just dipped below the horizon, leaving the city skyline in a wash of deep purples and oranges. The soft hum of traffic on the busy streets of Westchester, New York, contrasts with the stillness of the luxury apartment perched on the 18th floor of a sleek downtown building. Jason Carter, a successful architect in his mid-30s, sits in his favorite armchair, sipping a glass of wine. At the peak of his career, he's always been the kind of guy who goes the extra mile, whether it's designing a new skyscraper or making sure his family feels safe and supported. He's built his life around structure, stability, and the belief that hard work pays off. His wife, Rebecca, is his rock, or at least, that's what he thought. Rebecca, a passionate teacher and dedicated mother to their 2 young children, has always been the heart of their home. Jason prides himself on being a great provider, always putting in long hours at work to ensure his family's future. He's the kind of guy who sees problems as challenges to be solved, so when things start to go wrong, he takes it personally. But tonight, as he sits there, he feels a knot tightening in his stomach. Something's off. He can't quite put his finger on it, but the last few weeks have felt different. Rebecca's been distant, her smile not quite as bright as it used to be. Their conversations, once full of laughter and connection, have been reduced to small talk about the kids and their busy schedules. Jason brushes it off at first, telling himself it's just the stress of work and family life catching up with them both. But then he notices the little things. The way Rebecca's phone buzzes constantly, how she's always excusing herself for urgent calls, or how she's been coming home late more often than usual. He tries to ignore the feeling gnawing at him, but the more he thinks about it, the more he starts to question everything. It's not like Jason doesn't trust Rebecca. He does. He has to. They've been together for over 10 years, but the uncertainty starts to creep in when he recalls a recent evening when Rebecca came home looking flustered. Her clothes were a bit disheveled, as though she'd been in a rush. Her perfume, usually subtle, seemed stronger than usual. At first, Jason convinced himself that maybe it was just a long day, that Rebecca had gotten caught up in something at work. But now, sitting in their apartment alone, he can't shake the feeling that something more is going on. The next day, Jason finds himself standing in the kitchen, brewing a cup of coffee, as Rebecca prepares breakfast for the kids. He watches her movements from across the room, how she moves mechanically, like a woman on autopilot. Her eyes flicker briefly toward him before she turns back to the stove. Jason decides to ask her about something that's been on his mind. "So, how was your meeting yesterday?" he asks, trying to sound casual. Rebecca doesn't look up immediately, but she lets out a soft laugh. "It was fine," she says, but there's a hesitation in her voice. It's subtle, almost imperceptible, but Jason catches it. "You sure you've seemed a little off lately?" he continues, placing his mug down on the counter. Rebecca pauses, then looks at him. Her smile is small, but it doesn't reach her eyes. "I'm just tired, Jason. You know how it is, lots of work at school, and the kids need me. It's nothing to worry about." But Jason can't shake the feeling that there's more to it. He brushes it off again, telling himself that maybe he's just overthinking things. They've been through ups and downs before, and Rebecca's always been the one who keeps things together. But the seeds of doubt are planted, and he can't ignore them now. Later that day, Jason gets a call from his best friend, Mark. They've been friends since college, and Jason knows he can count on him for anything. Mark senses that something's off when they talk, and after some coaxing, Jason opens up about his concerns. "Dude, you've got to stop overthinking this," Mark says, but there's an edge to his voice. "I mean, I get it, you're worried. But Rebecca's been a rock for you. I don't know, man, maybe you're just stressed out from work." Jason hesitates. It's not just work, it's the way she's been acting. The phone calls, The late nights I don't know. I'm starting to feel like I don't even know her anymore. Mark is quiet for a moment. Look, maybe you should talk to her about it. You know, really talk. You can't just sit on it and let it fester. Jason knows Mark's right. The idea of confronting Rebecca fills him with anxiety, but he can't avoid it forever. It's been building for weeks, and if he doesn't face it now, it will consume him. That evening, as Jason and Rebecca sit down for dinner, he decides to address the issue. "Rebecca, we need to talk," he says, his voice calm but firm. "I've noticed that things have been different between us lately, and I need to know what's going on." Rebecca sets her fork down slowly, her expression shifting to one of caution. She doesn't answer immediately, instead, folding her hands in front of her. "What do you mean, Jason?" Her voice is soft, but there's an undertone of something he can't quite place. Jason takes a deep breath, gathering his thoughts before continuing. "I'm talking about the way you've been acting. Distant, distracted. You've been coming home late, getting more calls, always excusing yourself. I don't know. It's just not like you." Rebecca doesn't respond right away. Her fingers twitch nervously, and Jason notices how she's avoiding his gaze. "Jason, I'm just tired. I'm juggling a lot right now, and I don't know what you want me to say. You know how much I've been working? Everything's fine." But Jason can feel it. Her words don't match the look in her eyes. It's like there's something she's hiding, something she's afraid to admit. He presses on, his voice steady, but filled with frustration. "Rebecca, I don't want to accuse you of anything, I just need to know the truth. Are you hiding something from me?" Rebecca's face goes pale. She looks down at her plate, then back up at Jason, her eyes finally meeting his. The tension in the room is thick, but she doesn't answer. Instead, she pushes her chair back abruptly and stands. "I think I need some space," she says, her voice low and tight. "We'll talk later." Jason watches her leave, his heart pounding in his chest. He doesn't know what to make of the conversation, or what it means for their relationship, but deep down, something tells him that things are about to change. Drastically, the following days pass in a blur. Jason continues to notice Rebecca's increasingly erratic behavior. She's either gone for longer periods or hiding in her phone, her answers vague and unconvincing. There's no peace of mind for him, no reassurance that things will be okay. Something feels off, and every instinct inside him is screaming that he's standing on the edge of a revelation that could shatter everything. Then, one evening, it happens. Jason arrives home earlier than usual, trying to catch Rebecca before she heads out again. But what he finds when he walks into the apartment doesn't match the calmness he expected. There, on the coffee table, is an open letter. A letter that wasn't there earlier, addressed to him. And in that moment, Jason knows. The truth is closer than he ever imagined. Jason stands there in the doorway, his fingers still gripping the letter, as the reality of what he's holding hits him. It's from Rebecca, addressed to him, but it's not the kind of letter he expected to find. It's short, to the point, and painfully revealing. As he reads, his heart sinks further with each word. The letter is a confession. Rebecca admits to having been distant lately, acknowledging that something in their relationship has shifted, but she insists that it's not what he thinks. She claims it's not another man, though she never directly denies the possibility. Instead, she writes that she's felt lost in their marriage, disconnected in ways that she didn't know how to explain. She talks about how the pressure of raising a family and balancing her own ambitions has slowly taken a toll. And then, toward the end, there's a line that stabs Jason like a knife. "I think we've been living in different worlds for a while now." Jason sets the letter down, his breath catching in his chest. He feels like the ground beneath him has just shifted. His mind races. It's as if everything he thought he knew about his marriage, about Rebecca, has just been called into question. Is this an apology? An explanation? Or just a way of preparing him for something bigger? The letter doesn't answer the questions that are bubbling up inside him, and that's when Jason realizes he needs answers, not vague hints. He's been patient, he's tried to give Rebecca space, to let her talk when she's ready, but now the walls are closing in on him. The doubt, the nagging feeling that something is very wrong, is no longer something he can push aside. He has to confront it head on, and he needs to do it now. That evening, after the kids are tucked in bed and the apartment falls silent, Jason sits at the kitchen table, his fingers tapping anxiously on the edge of his coffee mug. He waits. He's been here before, in moments of uncertainty, waiting for Rebecca to come home and, hopefully, explain what's really going on. The clock ticks on. Finally, he hears the front door open, and Rebecca walks in, her heels clicking against the hardwood floor. Jason's eyes lock onto her as she steps inside, her face unreadable. For a moment, neither of them speaks. The tension is suffocating. It feels like everything that has been left unsaid is hanging in the air, just waiting to be addressed. Rebecca drops her purse onto the counter and starts to move toward the kitchen, but Jason stops her. "Rebecca, we need to talk," he says, his voice firm but not harsh. She looks at him, startled, like she wasn't expecting him to confront her so directly. She doesn't sit down, instead leaning against the counter, arms crossed. "What about?" she asks, trying to play it casual, but the nervousness in her voice is evident. "About everything," Jason replies, his gaze unwavering. "About this letter." Rebecca's face pales slightly. She knows exactly what he's referring to. She doesn't respond immediately, her fingers fiddling with the clasp of her purse. Jason's patience wears thin. "Is there someone else?" he asks, though the question barely makes it out of his mouth before he regrets it. It sounds accusatory, but the question is there now, and it hangs between them, heavy with unspoken fears. Rebecca's eyes flicker, a brief hesitation that Jason catches immediately. She shakes her head quickly, but Jason isn't sure if he believes her. She moves to sit down across from him at the table. "No, Jason, there's no one else," she says, her voice quieter now, almost too calm. It's not what you think." He watches her closely, the way she avoids looking him in the eye, the way her hands seem to twitch whenever she's talking about something important. Jason knows that this is the moment. If she's hiding something, it's now or never. He leans forward slightly. "Then what is it? Because all this distance, all the secrecy, I can't ignore it anymore." His voice is steady, but there's a quiet desperation creeping in. Rebecca takes a deep breath, as if trying to find the right words. "Jason, I've been struggling with everything with you, with the kids, with my job. I feel like I'm drowning in all of it, and I don't know how to get out. I've been so focused on everything else that I didn't realize how much we were slipping." Jason doesn't know what to say. His head is spinning. He's been so caught up in the growing distance between them, the late nights, the secrecy, that he didn't stop to consider that Rebecca might just be overwhelmed, stretched too thin by the demands of their life. But still, something doesn't sit right. Her explanation doesn't cover all the gaps. There's more. He can feel it. He takes a deep breath, trying to stay calm. "Rebecca, I want to believe you. I do. But I need you to be honest with me. What else are you hiding?" Rebecca goes silent, staring at the table, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. The silence stretches on, thick and uncomfortable. Jason's heart is pounding, his mind racing. And then, finally, the words spill out. "I've been seeing someone," she admits quietly, barely above a whisper. Jason freezes. The words don't make sense at first. His brain takes a moment to process them, and when it finally clicks, his world shatters. "Who?" he asks, his voice barely audible. Rebecca takes a shaky breath. "His name is Ben. He's a colleague from work. I didn't mean for it to happen, Jason. It just did. We've been talking for months, and then it turned into something more." Jason feels like the air has been sucked out of the room. His chest tightens as he processes what she's just said. The anger starts to rise, but it's a slow burn. He's too shocked to react immediately. "You've been seeing him behind my back?" Jason's voice cracks as he forces the words out. He doesn't know whether to feel betrayed or just numb. His thoughts feel scattered, and all he can focus on is the picture of Rebecca with someone else. "I'm sorry," she says, her voice trembling. "I never wanted to hurt you. It's just, I felt so alone, Jason." And he listened. He was there when you weren't, and I didn't know how to stop it. Jason stares at her, his mind spinning. So, All that stuff about being distant and stressed was just a cover. Rebecca looks down, not able to meet his gaze anymore. I didn't know how to tell you I didn't want to lose everything. Jason doesn't know what to say. The room feels like it's closing in around him. All the questions he had, the doubts, the suspicions, are flooding him now. Too many to process. Rebecca is crying now, but Jason can't bring himself to feel sympathy. The truth is out, and it's worse than he imagined. It's not just the emotional distance, not just the late nights or the secret phone calls. It's a betrayal. Plain and simple. I think I need some space, Jason says, his voice shaky. I need to think. Rebecca stands, her eyes pleading, but Jason doesn't know what to do anymore. Everything he thought he knew about their life is slipping away, and he can't even begin to wrap his mind around the fact that the woman he loved, the mother of his children, has been hiding this from him. As she leaves the room, Jason is left alone with his thoughts, the weight of the situation pressing down on him like a storm he's been trying to outrun for weeks. But now, the storm has arrived. The tension between Jason and Rebecca continues to escalate, and with each passing day, the fractures in their relationship seem deeper, harder to ignore. Jason's mind spins, torn between his desire to preserve his family and the undeniable sense of betrayal that hangs heavy over him. He knows that something has to give, but every instinct within him says that whatever happens next, it's going to change everything. It's a few days later when Jason walks into the apartment after work, expecting to find the usual quiet. He's been stewing in his thoughts all day, trying to make sense of it all, but what he finds is far from the quiet he hoped for. Rebecca stands by the door, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. Her face is pale, and for the first time in weeks, she's not hiding behind a mask of forced calm. Her eyes are bloodshot, as if she hasn't slept for days. Jason, she says, her voice breaking as she speaks. We need to talk, please. Jason stops dead in his tracks, the weight of the situation hitting him all over again. What about? He asks, his voice quiet but sharp. His heart is still racing from everything that's been building up, and he knows whatever comes next could be the final nail in the coffin. Ben, she begins, her voice cracking as she says his name. I've ended it, I swear to you. It's over, I know I've hurt you. I can't take back what I did, but I'm trying to make things right. I'm asking you for a chance. Jason stands motionless for a moment. He wants to believe her. He wants so badly to believe that this is just a rough patch, that things can be fixed with enough effort and understanding. But everything about Rebecca's demeanor tells him that she's not completely sure of what she's asking for. Her words are filled with desperation, but there's something hollow behind them. You think ending it with him is going to fix things? Jason's voice is thick with frustration. You think that's all it takes to erase what you've done? Rebecca takes a step forward, her eyes pleading. No, Jason, I don't expect you to forgive me that easily. I want to try. I want us to fix this, to be a family again. I'm willing to do whatever it takes. Jason looks at her, his mind swirling with confusion, hurt, and doubt. He's been down this road before, after all. The promises, the apologies, the hopes that things might turn back to the way they were. But what if they can't? What if things can never go back to normal? I don't know if I can do that, Jason admits, his voice barely above a whisper. I don't know if I can trust you anymore, Rebecca. Every time I look at you, I see him. Every time I hear your voice, I feel the betrayal. Can you even understand that? Rebecca's face crumbles as the weight of his words hits her. The tears she's been holding back finally spill over. She takes another step toward him, reaching for his hand. But Jason pulls away instinctively, as though he can't bear to be touched right now. I'm sorry, she whispers, her voice small and defeated. I really am, but I'll do anything to prove to you that I love you, Jason. I'll fight for you. For us. Please don't give up on me. Jason stares at her for a moment, then turns away, pacing in a tight circle. The overwhelming flood of emotions threatens to drown him. The anger, the hurt, the deep sadness that's built up over the past few weeks. He's not sure how much more he can take. And yet, part of him wants to believe that they can still find their way back to each other. But with every fiber of his being, he knows that it's never going to be the same. I don't know if I can forgive you, Jason finally says, his voice cracking with emotion. I don't even know who I am anymore. All I see is someone who lied to me, someone who didn't care enough to come to me when things were falling apart. All you had to do was talk to me, Rebecca. But you chose him. You chose someone else over me, over our family." Rebecca is shaking now, her hands at her sides, her sobs uncontrollable. She tries to speak, but the words get stuck in her throat. Jason feels a pang of guilt at the sight of her. But it doesn't stop the ache in his chest. He feels like he's suffocating, torn between the woman he once loved and the reality of the situation he finds himself in. Finally, Jason exhales a long, shaky breath. "I think we both know that we can't keep pretending like nothing happened, and I can't keep going on like this, living in a house full of lies." Rebecca collapses into a chair, burying her face in her hands. Jason turns away, his heart heavy. The thought of their children, of what they'll go through if their marriage falls apart, is the only thing that stops him from walking out that door right now. But as he steps toward the door, ready to leave this chapter of his life behind, he hears Rebecca's voice again, soft and trembling. "Jason, please don't leave. I'll do anything. Just give me a chance. Please." Jason stands at the door for a moment longer, his hand on the handle. He doesn't know what to do. He doesn't know how to fix this. His mind is a war zone, torn between staying and trying to work things out, and walking away to salvage whatever peace of mind he can. In the silence that fills the room, Jason makes his decision. He opens the door slowly and walks out, not looking back. The cold night air hits him like a slap in the face, but he doesn't care. There's no turning back now. Whatever happens next, it will be a path he has to walk alone. Days pass, and the tension between Jason and Rebecca continues to build. They don't speak much. When they do, it's terse, guarded. There's no warmth, no familiarity. It's like they're strangers living in the same space, both clinging to whatever shred of normalcy they can. But Jason's mind is made up. He's already started looking at apartments, at options for living separately. The idea of divorce weighs heavily on him, but he knows it's the only way to move forward. He can't keep living this way, trapped in a marriage that no longer feels like his own. Then, one evening, as he's sorting through some of his things, he finds something he didn't expect. It's a letter, hidden in the back of a drawer, addressed to him. It's from Rebecca. He opens it slowly, not sure what to expect this time, and as he reads, a strange mix of emotions floods over him: guilt, sadness, and something he can't quite name. Rebecca admits, in the most honest way she's ever been, that she's afraid of losing him, afraid of the future, afraid of being alone. And she apologizes, truly apologizes, for everything she's done. There's a rawness to the words that Jason hasn't seen in her before. A vulnerability that's almost too much for him to process, and just like that, the reality of their relationship hits him harder than ever. It's not just a betrayal. It's the end of something. Something that, for better or for worse, he thought was forever. Jason's footsteps echo in the empty hallway as he heads back to his apartment. It's been a week since the confrontation with Rebecca, a week since the weight of everything, the lies, the betrayal, the silence, started to sink in. But even now, as he stands at the door to their home, his heart is heavy with the uncertainty of what lies behind it. The letter Rebecca wrote had changed something within him. It wasn't just an apology, it was an admission. Her fear of losing him was genuine, and that raw honesty is something he hadn't expected. But it's still not enough. He can't forget what she's done. He can't forget the way he felt when he found out she'd been seeing another man. And while the apology stirs something inside him, it doesn't undo the damage. He stands in the doorway for a long moment, his hand resting on the doorframe. He wants to go in, he wants to pretend that everything's fine, to believe that maybe they can rebuild. But the reality of their relationship stares back at him like a mirror, and it's cracked beyond repair. Taking a deep breath, Jason opens the door. Inside, the apartment feels different. The silence is suffocating, like a weight pressing down on his chest. Rebecca is sitting on the couch, her legs tucked under her, a blanket draped over her shoulders. She looks up when she hears the door open, her eyes wide, waiting for him to speak. Jason closes the door behind him softly, and they stand there for a long moment, neither of them sure of what to say. The tension is unbearable. Jason's heart is pounding in his chest, his thoughts a whirlwind. Everything inside him tells him that they can't go on like this. He sits down across from her, not close enough to touch, but close enough to feel the space between them. "Rebecca," he begins, his voice thick with emotion. "I don't know what to say anymore. We've been through so much, and I can't keep pretending like things are normal." Rebecca's lips tremble as she tries to speak. "I know," she whispers. "I know I've messed up. I don't know how to fix this, Jason, I don't. But I need you to know that I love you. I've always loved you, and I'm sorry for everything I did." Jason's chest tightens at her words. He wants to believe her. He really does, but the scars she's left are too deep. It's not just the affair, it's the deceit, the lies, the way she pushed him away when he needed her most. The truth is, they've both been living in different worlds for so long, neither one realizing how far apart they'd grown. He lets out a slow breath and looks her in the eye, trying to make sense of the whirlwind of emotions coursing through him. "I don't know if I can forgive you, Rebecca. I don't know if I can live with this. I've been asking myself if we can rebuild from here, but I can't seem to find an answer." Rebecca's voice cracks as she reaches for his hand, her eyes filled with tears. "Please don't say that, Jason. Please, I'm begging you. I know I've hurt you more than I can explain, but I'm asking for a chance. I'm asking for a chance to show you I can change, that we can get through this." The desperation in her voice catches him off guard. He's been so focused on his own pain that he hasn't fully stopped to think about what Rebecca is feeling. He sees the fear in her eyes, the same fear that's been haunting him, the fear of losing everything. But Jason knows one thing: fear isn't enough. It can't heal the wound. He looks away, his thoughts racing. "I don't think it's about fear anymore, Rebecca. It's about trust. And I don't know if I can trust you again." There's a long silence as Rebecca's face falls. She lets go of his hand and wraps her arms around herself, as if trying to shield herself from his words. "I never wanted to hurt you, but I've done it. And now, I have to live with that. I don't expect you to forgive me. I need you to know that I've learned the hard way." Jason stands up, pacing back and forth. He's overwhelmed with the weight of everything: the guilt, the anger, the heartbreak. His chest feels tight, and he can hardly breathe. He thought he could walk away from this, but something keeps pulling him back. He stops pacing and turns to face her. "What if I can't forgive you?" he asks quietly. "What if I'm not the man you married anymore? What if I'm too broken to fix?" Rebecca's eyes search his face, her voice barely above a whisper. "You're not broken, Jason. We're both broken. And if we're going to fix this, we have to do it together. But I can't do this without you." Jason closes his eyes, feeling the weight of her words, the raw emotion in the room. It's so hard to look at her and not feel the pain of everything that's happened. He takes a deep breath, his heart pounding in his chest. "I don't know what the future holds for us, Rebecca. I just don't know." Rebecca's face falls as she stands, her hand outstretched toward him, but he steps back, needing space. She's pleading with him, but he can't find the strength to let her in, not right now. The silence between them is thick, a barrier neither of them knows how to break. Jason feels like he's standing at a crossroads, one path leading toward the painful truth of moving on, and the other, toward trying to rebuild the life they once had, a life that now feels irreparably fractured. As he walks toward the door again, Rebecca calls out to him, "Jason, please don't leave me. Don't leave us." He pauses, hand on the door, but doesn't turn around. The words catch in his throat, but he doesn't speak. He doesn't know what he's supposed to say anymore. He doesn't know if he can fix this. He walks out of the door, leaving Rebecca standing in the silence of their home, tears streaming down her face. The door closes behind him, with a finality that echoes in his chest. The following weeks are a blur of phone calls, arguments, and forced conversations. Jason moves into a temporary apartment, trying to find some semblance of peace, but the emotional turmoil continues to grip him. He keeps telling himself that walking away was the right thing to do, but there's a part of him that keeps wondering if he's making a mistake. Rebecca tries to reach him, sending text messages, leaving voicemails, but Jason can't bring himself to respond. Every time he sees her name on his phone, a lump forms in his throat. He wants to forgive her. He wants to believe that they can start fresh, but the wounds are too deep, the lies too heavy. One night, as Jason is scrolling through his phone, a notification pops up. It's from Rebecca. But this time, it's not a message asking for forgiveness. Instead, it's an announcement. She's moving out. She's leaving the apartment, starting fresh, going to live on her own. The words hit Jason harder than he expects. He knows this is her attempt to show him that she's serious about change. But the finality of it feels like the last nail in the coffin. Jason doesn't know if he should be relieved or heartbroken, but one thing is for sure. This is the turning point. The path he's been on has come to an end, and now it's up to him to decide if there's a future for them. But whatever decision he makes, one thing is clear. The road ahead will be just as difficult as the one they've already walked. The months following Jason's decision to walk away from his marriage were some of the hardest of his life. In the quiet of his new apartment, he tried to adjust to a life that felt both foreign and familiar. The weight of the betrayal was still there, but as time passed, the sharp edges began to dull. It wasn't a complete healing, but it was progress. Rebecca, on the other hand, seemed determined to rebuild her life. She moved into a small place downtown, a far cry from the home they once shared. She focused on her career, took up new hobbies, and gradually distanced herself from the guilt that had been eating at her for so long. She sought therapy, not just for the affair, but for the deeper issues in her life she had ignored for too long. Still, despite the progress, Jason couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. He wasn't ready to go back to Rebecca. Not yet. He wasn't sure he ever would be. But he had to admit, there was a sense of clarity in his decision. He had chosen to let go of the past and start over. He had learned that sometimes, in order to heal, you had to face the hurt head-on and walk away from what you thought you needed. Then came the call. It was late one evening when Jason's phone rang. His first instinct was to ignore it. The sound of Rebecca's name on his screen still triggered a reflex, but something told him he should pick up. He answered, bracing himself for the usual pleasantries or the rehearsed apology that always seemed to follow their conversations. But this time, Rebecca's voice was different. It was softer, quieter, filled with a vulnerability he hadn't heard in a long time. "Jason," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "I've been thinking a lot. And I just wanted to tell you that I don't expect you to forgive me, but I hope one day we can find a way to be friends again." Jason felt a lump form in his throat. It wasn't the apology he was expecting. It wasn't an attempt to win him back or to convince him they could pick up where they left off. It was something deeper, more honest. It was a simple acknowledgement of their shared past and the reality that they could never go back. But maybe, just maybe, they could build something new from the ashes. "I don't know if I can ever be that person for you," Jason replied, his voice steady but full of emotion. "But I appreciate you saying that. I really do. I think we both needed this time apart." Rebecca was silent for a moment, and Jason could hear her breathing softly through the phone. He imagined her sitting in her apartment, alone, just as he had been so many nights. "I just wanted to tell you that I'm sorry for everything," she said finally. "For the affair, for the lies, for not being the wife you needed." Jason's chest tightened again, but there was no bitterness in his heart now. Only a quiet understanding. "I know," he said. "I know you are. I think I'm sorry too, for not seeing what was happening, for not being there when you needed me." The silence on the other end wasn't uncomfortable this time. It was a shared moment of understanding, a small but significant reconciliation that neither of them had expected. As they hung up, Jason felt a sense of peace settle over him. He wasn't ready to let Rebecca back into his life as a partner, but he could now let go of the anger and resentment that had held him captive for so long. He had been holding on to the pain, as if it could somehow protect him from the hurt, but now he understood. Letting go of that pain was the only way forward. Months passed, and Jason's life slowly found its rhythm again. He threw himself into his work, designing buildings that reflected the strength he had found within himself. He still carried the scars of his failed marriage, but they didn't define him anymore. He started dating again, cautiously at first, unsure if he was ready for a new relationship. But he knew he wasn't the same person he was when he had first walked out of his home. He had changed, grown stronger, more aware of what he wanted, and, more importantly, what he deserved. Rebecca, too, moved forward. She took up painting as a way to channel her emotions, finding a new outlet for her creativity. She started volunteering with organizations that helped women who were in situations similar to hers, feeling trapped, lost, and alone. It wasn't about redemption, but it was about making amends with herself. The affair, the lies, it was all part of her past now, something she could no longer ignore, but something she had learned to live with. And slowly, she found peace with it. But the most significant change for both of them came on a quiet afternoon, when Jason received a message from Rebecca. It wasn't an apology, it wasn't a plea for reconciliation, it was just a simple message. "I'm proud of you. I hope you're happy." Jason stared at the screen for a moment, a soft smile tugging at the corner of his lips. He didn't need her approval to move on, but hearing those words, so genuine and free from any ulterior motive, was the final piece of closure he needed. It was a reminder that healing doesn't always come in the form of grand gestures or dramatic moments. Sometimes, it comes in the small, quiet acknowledgments that things are, at last, settling into their rightful place. Both of them had done the hard work of healing, and while their paths had diverged, they had reached a point of mutual understanding. The final scene finds Jason standing at a construction site, overlooking the foundation of his latest project. The sun is setting, casting a warm golden light over the structure as workers move around, putting the final touches on the building that will one day stand tall, a testament to his perseverance. He takes a deep breath, letting the cool evening air fill his lungs. He's done it. He's rebuilt himself, brick by brick, just like the buildings he designs. There's still a long way to go, but for the first time in a long while, Jason feels at peace. As he looks out over the horizon, he receives a message. It's from Rebecca. He opens it, his fingers trembling just slightly, as he reads, "I hope one day, we'll both find the happiness we've been searching for. Take care, Jason." Jason smiles, his heart light. He knows their story has come to an end, but he also knows that the journey they both took, through love, betrayal, and pain, has shaped them into who they are now. And with that, Jason finally feels ready to take the next step in his life. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the story, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel for more. Stay tuned for our next video and more gripping stories that will keep you on the edge of your seat. Until next time.